Hey guys, thanks for being here today. Welcome back if you've not been here before. So, in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about people pleasing and how people pleasing almost cost me my identity. So, just kind of wanted to go through this with you all and, you know, just talk about the topic of this and see if this is something that maybe you struggle with, and hopefully I'll be able to help guide you through it. So, for a lot of us women out there, we may be caregivers, we are moms, some of us may be wives, and the people that depend on us, so oftentimes, we give of ourselves until we just really don't have much left to give. And if you're anything like how I am, a lot of times this can feel like we are giving from a place of love. But however, a lot of times it really does come down to costing us our identity because we are giving so much of ourselves to others, and maybe there is not enough left over for ourselves at the end. Um, so, if you've not been here before, my name is Renee. Welcome. And if you have been here, thanks for joining again. This is Becoming Her Again. So, welcome to my channel. I'm super happy to have you. And we will just get started. So, today's episode, really is just going to be talking about people pleasing just in general. So I guess I started thinking about this and I thought, I don't know about you, but have you ever, really looked in the mirror and kind of didn't realize and recognize who you were anymore, right? And if you've struggled with that, just as I have, a lot of times this comes down to, we have just given so much of ourselves to other people who have, are around us and in our world. So, you know, when we're losing ourselves and in the process of losing ourselves, and where we're not able to recognize who we are, we don't really see that that's happening. I mean, this takes a lot of years of consistently doing this, and we don't recognize that we no longer see ourselves the way that maybe we used to. So it happens very slowly, and it's not something that's just going to happen overnight, right? So how does this happen though? Like, I started thinking about this myself, obviously, and that's why I'm talking to you about it. How does it happen, and when does this start happening? And I started to really see that a lot of this is, we just consistently are going through our everyday life, and we're compromising on things that maybe we shouldn't be compromising on. And another thing is, saying that you're fine or you're all right, even when you're not, right? Or ignoring your own feelings because you're putting other people's feelings above your own. Another thing is, saying yes to things when you don't really want to, and you really want to say, thank you, but no thank you, right? And you're choosing others' needs over your own. And all of these are big ones. But that's a really big one, for sure. And a lot of, this goes back to just being caretakers and being moms and wives and, spouses, or, whatever this is. And everybody depends on you, but then all of a sudden you feel like you don't even know, like really who you are as a person anymore. And if you tell the people around you that, no, I can't do this, then you feel like you're letting them down. And that's what we really want to get into today because, I get this, I recognize it, and it's something that I have struggled with absolutely my whole life. And I certainly didn't even really realize that this was happening. It was years in the making. And especially now I recognize, that this is what I have gone through. So hopefully, we can kind of dive into this to figure out how to overcome this issue, because it is really an issue, because it causes a lot of problems for ourselves if we continue on this path, I believe. And I think a lot of us too, especially if we're empathetic people and we're compassionate and we're caregivers and we're just those people, there's always going to be a part of us that, we give of ourselves so easily. And, we want to please others because that's the kind of person that we are. So I believe that we can do that, but it just has to be done where we're not doing it all the time and at all costs to ourselves, right? So don't get scared off yet. I'm not telling you you can never, be kind to the other people in your life. And I know that this is what you want to do because obviously this is the kind of person that you are, or you wouldn't be a people pleaser. So when did this really begin for you? So these are some notes that you can take along the session as we talk about this. But, just a question to ask yourself, when did you start recognizing that maybe you were a people pleaser, or maybe you've not even realized that you are a people pleaser? And again, that doesn't, it's okay if you haven't, but hopefully, as we talk about this, and if it is something that maybe you now are recognizing, then, you'll be able to start working on, changing this for yourself and, tightening this up so it's not becoming such a huge mountain to tackle down the road in your life. So, it often starts out with things like this because you are so concerned about everybody else around you, whether that's your kids or your spouse or, the people that you're caring for, whoever that is. And you're so giving and loving and compassionate and empathetic that you want to please them. And of course you do. Absolutely, 100%. And I understand that fully. And as I go through this topic with you guys, I think about these things myself because, again, this is something that I most definitely have struggled with. And I'm recognizing it now. And I'm starting to realize that, we can't always have the day revolve around everybody else and what they need. And it's hard, especially when you are the caretaker, So, if this is something that you are also dealing with where you feel like you've just given of yourself so much and you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings by saying, no, I can't do this, or no, I can't help you, or I'm sorry, I'm unable to, go to the grocery store for you. I'm working, or, whatever it is. These are things that we need to start looking at and start recognizing, because what happens is this starts to wear you out and you become so exhausted from doing this for so many years. And, I have consistently led this life and, for 30 years in a marriage with children and all of that, that's who I was and that's who I've been. And then anybody outside of that world as well that knows me, and needed any sort of help, well, of course, that is what I'm going to do because, that's the kind of person I am. But unfortunately, it leads to these issues where it can be very difficult to break this cycle. So maybe you learned early on in your childhood that you had to keep other people happy. So it prevented maybe a conflict in the room, or maybe you felt like that was your job in the family to be the person who, they could ask to do things and you always handled them. Um, maybe you're the person in the room who can feel everybody's emotions and you can read the room, right? And you know what's going on. So, you know that, like, well, Susie over there is not going to like it if I don't, stand up and say whatever Susie needs, then it's going to be a problem. And I don't want Susie to be upset with me, because that's going to make Susie upset. So, just an example. Maybe you've been really good at anticipating what other people's needs are. And I'm going to dive into this a little bit more. But maybe you started to feel like they were being valued, and their value came from, how you respond to them. So, I just want to talk about, like, an example of this. Like, was I being loved for who I was, or was I being valued for what I did? So that's just kind of like a reflection question to think about here, because a lot of times when we're the people pleaser and we start to recognize that this is happening, we also need to ask ourselves, were the people around us, were they loving us because of who we are, or because of what we brought to the table and what I did for them? And that is something, I don't know about you, and if you've not recognized if you're a people pleaser right now or not. But I know, as I started to really recognize this within myself, that's the question that I really had to ask myself. Are people really loving me for me, or are they just loving what I've brought to the table? Um, and you know what? I quite honestly think it's probably the end part of that, because I'm so freely giving of myself to the point that I don't want anybody to be upset with me. So, of course, I don't want to tell them no, because why would I want anybody to be upset with me? And I think I've said this in another video. If you're empathetic, a lot of us out there, um, you know, I know it's supposed to be a gift, having empathy and compassion, but a lot of that gift too can come with being able to really feel emotions of others. So a lot of us take that on, and we carry the weight of other people's emotions. I'm very highly sensitive to other people's emotions. So it's very challenging for me to let's just say I'm sitting there telling somebody, hey, no, I'm not able to help you with this. Well, that's going to be a difficult conversation for me, because I already know that they're upset. And I most definitely think that they are upset because I'm saying I can't help them with this. So that's just an example of, like, carrying that weight of other people's feelings and emotions, and, like, really picking that up. And it really, causes a weight on our shoulders if we're, highly sensitive to those emotions around us. So we have to be very careful, because what happens is, as we're going through this, we just start taking on more and more and more, because, all of these people's feelings we're feeling, right? So we don't want to hurt their feelings. But the problem is, again, are they loving us because of who we are, or what we're bringing to the table for them? Because really, that's what it's coming down to. And there's almost a part of that I don't know about you, but I know for me that I have felt more recently in my life, where I'm able to recognize that I have felt and am feeling as though maybe I'm being taken advantage of, because I'm so giving of that. And, we don't want that to happen, because when we do start to feel like, maybe we're being taken advantage of, then we start to become resentful about those things, because people aren't really showing up for us in the ways that maybe we're showing up for them. So, it's something to think about and something to really recognize. So, number one, I just want you to ask yourself, because I kind of want to break this down as we go through it, but I want you to just kind of really ask yourself, is this something that you struggle with where you are a people pleaser? If you are a people pleaser, I want you to ask yourself, are you the type of person who really reads the room and takes on other people's emotions? And if you are, then I want you to really stop and think about the reflection question. Are the people in my world, are they showing me love because of who I am, or because of what I'm bringing to the table for them? Okay. So, I want you just to kind of write those things down as we go through this. Because I think it's very important to understand it. And first of all, we can't always understand it if we've not recognized that we even maybe are struggling with this. And once we realize that we're struggling with this, even if it's on a very small scale, then we want to start recognizing what it is that we're doing, because not everybody does this. So we can also work on this to be better for ourselves. And and a lot of this comes down to, like, telling people, no, I can't do this, or I'm sorry, that's not going to work for me. So so we'll get into that as well. So yeah, so kind of like, let's start with that. So the difference between kindness and people pleasing, this is a really important distinction. And so I want to talk about this. Kindness talks about and says, hey, I want to help you because I care about you. But people pleasing says, I need to help you because I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I don't help you. And I want you to really hear the difference there, because the people pleasing side, it kind of comes down to when I say what I just said, I'm afraid of what happens if I don't help you. Okay. That's within us. So that's the part that we need to change. Whereas I want to help you because I care. Of course, yes, you do care and you do want to help. But then when you are the people pleaser and you're really struggling with breaking this down and trying to understand, are you a people pleaser or do you just care? And if you're leaning towards you are a people pleaser, what is happening in that sentence is you personally are afraid of what's going to happen if you don't help them. And what I mean by that is, what if you have to say, no, I'm not able to help you? Well, you're so concerned about hurting their feelings or upsetting them or disappointing them, or they're going to look at you badly, right? Because you didn't come and show up for them the way that they expected you to. So it changes it. It changes it from them and what they need to it really being about us and what we need to do for them. Like, we have to be able to know that we are able to help them. But if I don't help them, I am afraid of how I'm going to look. So it comes down to, like, our identity in a sense, So just try to really think about that, because that's a big one, and trust me. And again, this is something that I have dealt with for my whole life. So it's kind of hard to explain it as well, because because I understand both sides of this, because I'm newly on the side of trying to get a better handle on this, and it's difficult, it really is. So helping people from love versus helping them from fear is two different things, Giving because you want to give to them versus giving because you feel like you're responsible for everybody's emotions, is different. So we have to be able to see and recognize the difference between love, graciously, loving others, and then graciously trying to love them, but it's all fear-based, and it's fear-based that they are not going to like you, or they're going to be mad at you, or we're going to disappoint them. All of these things, and it's fear driven. Absolutely. 100% it's fear driven. And so those are the things that are a distinct difference between the two, between just, being a kind person and being a people pleaser. So, the signs, there are signs that can happen when you're losing yourself. And, some of the things that I struggled with personally and still do. So this struggle is not over. This is simply, a conversation of this, and that I've recognized this and I'm working towards, doing things differently. And this is going to take a lot of years, and it's taken a lot of years to become a people pleaser, right? Like that didn't happen overnight. And so where I am now is to undo it is also going to take a lot of years to not become or to become different, to become a person who is not trying to be a people pleaser, and kind of going out of my way to actually not be a people pleaser. But I had to ask myself, kind of like some questions on like what I wanted. And some of my thoughts were, well, like, what will they think if like I don't say yes or show up for them in this way or that way? They're going to be upset. I don't even question, will they be upset? I assume that they will be upset. There's no question. It's just they will be upset. I'll create conflict. I'll create like this this distance there, and I don't want there to be distance. I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. I don't want to make them upset with me. Like I just don't like that. But what happens is I have, in all of that, I just ignored all of my own needs. Okay. And so what do I mean by that? Well, everything was about them, number one. Nothing was about me. So I ignored my own needs by pushing down my feelings of what it was that maybe I needed or wanted. I convinced myself that all of the things that I might be feeling because I don't want to do these things, just they didn't matter. They were not a big deal because, the other person matters more than I mattered. And I learned to tolerate things that hurt me, just by doing all of these things to myself. So, like we can't continue to do that and then expect us to be okay, because what happens is then we become disconnected from ourselves. You know what I mean? Like it's not good. We're so worried about this other person that now we're not worried about us and ourselves and how we feel and the truth of what we feel. And, and it's crazy because even in my life, as I have tried to worry about myself or put myself first, there were many situations where I was not listened to, I was not heard, or not really even respected on what I was feeling and where I was coming from. So this is where this starts happening because, we continuously think then, Well, the other person, whoever that other person is, they're so, up here, like we've put them so up high on a pedestal, and we don't want to upset them in any way, that then we are no longer true to our own selves. So we're just left in the shadow of like, well, we don't matter at all. It's about everybody else. And that is just so not okay, and it's not true. And it's quite honestly just silly if you think about it. Like, because how many people out there do this? Some of us do this, but I don't think too many. I think the majority of people that I know are definitely not people pleasers. Like, they're not somebody who's worried about my feelings. Or maybe it's because I'm a people pleaser, so they're not over here trying to please me. You know what I mean? But, I'm just thinking, like, if you think it through, how many people do you actually know that are so concerned about other people's feelings? The majority of the world just doesn't really seem to be that way. So I think that we need to start worrying about our own feelings and stop worrying about everybody else's. Because we do find ourselves disconnected from ourselves when this continuously happens, because we're not true to ourselves anymore. We're just like, leaving ourselves in the dust in a sense. It's like, oh my goodness. So, I knew what everybody else liked. I knew how everybody else was going to react. I, knew what everybody else needed. But when it was all said and done and I was alone and left by myself and everything's silent, well, guess what? None of those people were around worrying about me. And, I didn't even know who I was because I didn't know what I liked anymore. You know what I'm saying? Because I had given and given and given so much of myself to others that there was nothing here for me to look inward on, because everything was about everybody else. And now all those people were not in my space any longer. So then I had to really figure out how to even find myself again, to figure out what it was that I even needed. Does that make sense? It's a very difficult thing. So think about that a second. When you're disconnected from yourself like that, you just don't even know who you are, and you feel very, very lost. So I don't want any of you to feel that way. So I really want you to think about this and really break this down in your head if you can. There's a cost to ourselves when we're people pleasers. A lot of times, and oh man, every one of these that I'm getting ready to talk about is part of my story, part of my journey. So, I'm not going to go into full detail, but I'm just going to talk about it. Our voice, what happens with our voice? Well, we stop expressing our opinions because we think they don't matter. Our boundaries. Well, if you've heard me say in any other videos, I never had a boundary in my life. I never even knew what a boundary was. Now I'm understanding what a boundary is, but this is after 2.5 years of being on my own, okay? So no, I didn't have a boundary. What the heck is a boundary, right? And my confidence. Well, I would question all of my decisions. If I'm making my own decisions, I was questioning those decisions because my confidence was definitely shaken. My identity, well, did that even exist? I've talked about that before as well. We become everything else to everybody else except to us. So, the one who needs us, I couldn't find that person because I was almost like a shadow. Like I was doing everything for everybody else, but not for me, not for myself. The hardest part about losing yourself is that sometimes you don't even realize that you're gone until you finally get quiet enough to hear yourself again. And that is exactly what happened to me. There was nothing around. There was nobody around. I had lost everything. I was alone. I was totally broken into pieces, and I didn't know how to help myself. So I most certainly didn't know how to find myself, right? Um, and the hardest part is that, I had to just be in complete silence to even begin to find out who I was or where I was or who I am or any of this, to even begin. And that just means understanding it on such a slight amount of scale. It's like a piece of rice, like a grain of rice. That's how little it was in the beginning. So that's such a powerful thought, though, right? And I want you to really hear that. I want you to think about it, because if that's how you're feeling, where you're not able to figure out like who you are, where you are, and all of those things have happened, you've lost your voice, no boundaries, you have no confidence left, your identity's been shaken, and you're not even sure who you are as a person. That's the hardest part, because when you lose yourself, you can't find yourself in the midst of that tsunami, right? The chaos. You can't find yourself there. It is when it's totally forward, fast forward, go forward, and now you're alone and you're sitting there in silence. And now you're trying to figure out if you can even hear your own thoughts, because everybody else's has been full top of your mind. It's a terrible thing. So really, really, really focus in on that, because that's so important. And I don't want you to go through what I went through. It's an awful thing to feel. And and if you're going through it and you want to talk to me, that's what I'm here for, because I want to be able to help you with that. It's very important. Finding yourself again, though, is where we need to start looking at. Okay, so I want you to start thinking about, not only what this whole channel is about, becoming her again, but start asking yourself questions like, what do you enjoy? Write these things down. What is it that you enjoy? What matters to you? What dreams do you have in your life? What part of yourself, or parts, which I'm sure are multiple, did you silence along the way? Who are you as a person? What do you want your core values to be? And do some small steps along the way with this. I mean, you don't need to feel like you have to do it all at once, and it won't be able to be done all at once. This takes a lot of time. Again, it's taken you years to learn to be a people pleaser. So it's going to take you years to learn to undo that. And it's okay. Celebrate the small steps along the way, because you're working toward a goal. So it's very important. But some of the small steps that you can take is just some examples. Try something new. Now, if you're new on your healing journey, I want you to remember that I don't feel that that's the time to try something new. I really don't. If you're just starting out on your healing journey, you're really going through it right now. So when I talk about doing things or trying things, I don't mean right away. And I certainly don't mean if you're right now in the chaos and the crisis of your healing journey. Because in my opinion, that is not the time to be focused on trying something new, okay? You're focused on this minute and trying to get through this minute and maybe the next minute, okay? And you're in that space for a reason. So make sure if you're in that space, make sure you're not doing this right now. You can make a note of this for down the road, but this is going to be a ways down the road. So just remember that. But if you're, further down your healing journey and this is a good time, then ask yourself, the things that you enjoy. What do you enjoy? What matters to you? What some of the new things are that you can try, and put them around those questions, right? And that'll help you decide, because a lot of times you don't even really know what something new is that you want to try, because you have no idea who you really are as a person, and that's okay. But another idea for a small step is just make a decision about something without asking anybody else's opinion. Because you know what? You can do this. You can make your own decisions, and you don't have to rely on somebody else. And if you're afraid of what your decision's going to be, start out small. Just try one thing, see how it goes, and then start learning to trust yourself a little bit as that goes, a little bit each time, right? You will start to recognize that you are becoming a little bit stronger as you go through this, because you're getting more comfortable with who you are as a person and what you're able to accomplish. So I know that when you're in this space, generally speaking, you are probably feeling very alone, but you might not actually be alone. And what I mean by that is you may still have little kids that you're raising, and maybe now, you and your spouse are split up, or you and your significant other are no longer together, and you're going through this healing journey, and you're trying to become better and not be a people pleaser, but you still don't have silence around you. So I want to talk about that, because it is hard at times to find a space where you can be silent, because I was going to say that's very important to have the time to be silent and have everything around you just quiet, so you're able to learn to become comfortable with yourself. So what I want you to try is, if you're really struggling with this and you have little ones that you take, that you're parenting or that you take care of, or whatever the case is, try and give yourself some time at nighttime. So after the kids are in bed, instead of turning on the TV, go sit in a room where you're able to dim the lights or light a couple candles and just sit there silently. You don't have to write anything down. You can rest your eyes, like literally sit there with your eyes closed, and just you don't have to meditate. It's just learning to be still with yourself. And if you start to do that, again, not every single day, you don't have to do this, but you do this, a couple times a week, you're able to start really recognizing that you're becoming a little bit more and more comfortable with yourself each time that you do that. And that is such a great thing, because now you're able to start trusting yourself a little bit more as you're going through this. So remember too that, you can trust in your voice again. So, if you want to talk to other people, and, explain what you're kind of, going through and what you're struggling with on this people pleasing aspect, you know, share that with people, a close friend, a family member that you can trust, somebody like that you are able to open up to about that. And they should be very excited for you as you go through this journey. So, we need to have people in our corner who's supporting of us, and I hope that you have that. And if you don't, you can reach out to me and we can schedule a call together. So if you feel like you've lost yourself trying to be everything for everybody else along the way, I want you to know something. You're still here and you're still on this journey, right? And the woman that you were before, you before you started shrinking yourself into being this person for everybody else, um, that person is still there, so becoming yourself again isn't about becoming somebody new. I talk about this a lot. It's very important that we know who we are. We're not trying to re-identify ourselves, right? We're becoming the person that we've always been, but we're just returning to the woman that we had lost, and so we're trying to find that person again so we can become the woman that we were always meant to be. So, yeah. So, you're still there and you're still you. So don't forget that. So I have a few questions that I just want you to reflect on this week if you, would like to. And I'll put these in the description as well. But where have you been choosing approval over authenticity? Authenticity. Sorry, I said that funny. So I want you to think about where you're choosing the approval from everybody else over being, authentic with yourself, right? Um, there's so many areas I know, like I said, that I still struggle with this. I could give you so many examples, but I'm sure you have many examples of your own. So think about that. And then think about what part of yourself have you been afraid to show to others? Because, so much of this, again, is fear-based. We're afraid that if we say no, or if we don't show up the way that we think everybody expects us to, that we're going to let people down. So this comes from fear. So what part of yourself have you been afraid to show? And then who are you when you're not trying to make everyone else happy? You know? I mean, and you might not know who you are right now. Because you might not know yourself right now, and that's okay. But recognizing small steps with all of this, just recognizing that this is maybe where you're at, um, is the start of change, because you can't change something that you don't acknowledge, right? And so many times it just comes down to recognizing that this is even an issue and acknowledging that, hey, I need to do a little bit better with this and stop giving so much of myself, because then you're left depleted and you're left tired and you're left drained, and I don't want you to go through that. I know what it feels like, and it is an awful feeling, and it has just sucked the ever living life out of me. So I do not want any of you to go through this. This is exactly why I have this channel. This is what I talk about. And I talk about myself on here to give you examples, because I don't want you guys to experience the same thing. So any of you who are listening, whether you know me or you don't, doesn't even matter. It's just about making sure that you don't go through this. If I can help one person, then I've done what I've been called to do, right? So, this is a heavier topic, I feel. It's hard to talk about in a sense, because it's almost like part of our identity, and I felt so passionately about being, you know, not that I was a people pleaser, but just that I am the type of person who cares so much on such a deep level for other people. So I wouldn't have considered myself a people pleaser in those words. However, I've been told throughout the years that I am, and I certainly know that that's what this is, and that is who I am, unfortunately. And so, we have to recognize it and change it. And, you guys are doing great work. I want you to remember that. I want you to be proud of yourself. I know this is a little bit of a tougher topic. And it was a little bit hard for me to talk about because it is a big part of my identity for sure, that I feel like now I'm, cutting off and saying, I don't think I want to be this anymore, right? But and I'm sorry about my voice. I'm still struggling a little bit on my sickness, but thanks for bearing with me. I still wanted to make sure that I still got a video out to you guys. But you guys are doing great. You're doing great on your journey. You're becoming her again, right? That's our whole goal. And each topic and each time that we talk about these things, you are able to think about them. And I hope I left you with some good insight on how to process this and look at it and start to heal yourself and, start to do better and start putting yourself first, because you know what? You matter. And you matter so much. I mean, because if you don't take care of you, then it's hard to, show up for everybody else. And, you know, quite honestly, let somebody bring their love to you. I mean, because it gets tiring always being that one that is the one who's making sure everybody else is okay. There are people, I'm sure, in your life that you feel like, man, it would be nice if they would check in, and see if I'm okay. And you know what? Maybe this will help, because, we can't always be that person carrying that weight for everybody. So, just be so proud of yourself. Take this away. And in the meantime, give yourself a lot of grace and a lot of love, and remind yourself that you're doing a great job. All right. Okay. Well, you take care, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye for now, friends.